hit us. So.
Wow. What happened?
So the bow of the ship stayed up. We had all of the watertight integrity closed, and it hit midship, and there was 450-pound pressure boilers. 2 of them went off at the same time that the torpedo went. So it was quite an explosion, if you might.
Basically broke the back of the ship.
Yeah, it broke it almost in half.
And let's talk about this, just for your background on this one, Richard. And again, our guest, Richard Snow, author of A Measureless Peril, is meeting Hugh Salter for the first time via phone. Mm-hmm. Hugh is here in the studio with me. You had several of your friends that were aboard the ship as well. You had several from Carteret County, is that correct?
6 from Carteret County, and one of them was in the water tender in the bottom of the ship, in the water tending the ship.
The steam
stuff.
Yep.
And he went down with the ship. He and 19 others went down, and 6 died going ashore or after they got ashore.
Speaking of which,
so a total of 26 we lost.
You were this was in Iceland, so the water was cold. What time of year was this?
January 29th, 1942.
I think it was very cold.
Yes, that's cool.
And was there enough time for the crew to make it to lifeboats?
Well, we launched all the lifeboats. Well, the ones that were intact,
mm-hmm.
and after we put them overboard and loaded them, we found that there was shrapnel had busted the bottom of them, and they rolled over. And 3 Icelandic fishermen boats came up and picked them up, and they carried them all into Iceland, into Reykjavik, and another place, I forgot the name of it, where they landed. But 6 of them died either going ashore or after they got ashore, and 20 actually went down on the ship.
It's interesting. Our guest, Hugh Salter, of course, we're hearing a real-life experience from World War II. Hugh, how long had you been on board the Alexander Hamilton prior to its sinking?
Well, I went on there in September 1940.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, part of the work was to be on the watch for all of the airlines crossing the ocean in case they were to have a problem.
Uh-huh.
Have a problem, then we'd be there for security purpose.
And then it was sunk January 1941?
42.
42. So you've been there almost 2 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. In that process, and we're going to get back to let's talk about those that you were lost aboard your ship. Who were those that were lost from Carteret County?
One was lost from Carteret County, Livingston Brooks from Harker's Island.
Mm-hmm.
And Frank Grantham from Moorhead, he was the chief. He was on the bridge. He was a flagman.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was Nathan Robinson from Atlantic, Clifton Willis from Atlantic, Dennis Pittman from Stacy, and I believe and myself. It's 6.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How many of those that survived continued in this service, Coast Guard or the Navy?
Frank Grantham and Clifton Willis.
Okay.
The 2 of them.
All right, and I want to go back to this observation because, again, I mentioned earlier, and Richard, I'd like you to step in on this conversation. The hours and hours of just scanning the horizon for a telltale sign of either a periscope or possibly the conning tower of the submarine had to be boring as all get out for those for the lookouts, and but
also excruciating if the weather was bad. And certainly on the up around Iceland and north of there, going on the awful Arctic convoys up to the Russian, taking supplies to the Russian port of Murmansk. The storms could be such. I remember reading about a watch that was, that is to say, the men up there looking out that had to stand out on the bridge for 20 hours before they could be relieved because the ship was pitching so violently that nobody could have lived to get to them. That's very hard work.
And in the process, the fact that you've got to stay mentally sharp for that period of time, either under those circumstances or, again, as I mentioned earlier, just the sheer boredom of time as you're scanning the horizon. Our guests are Richard Snow, the author of A Measureless Peril, America in the Fight for the Atlantic, the Longest Battle of World War II, and Hugh Salter, former federal marshal from Carteret County, and one of those who lived to tell the tale of being torpedoed. You're listening to Viewpoints on the Talk Station, FM 107, AM 1240. Viewpoints on the Talk Station, FM 107, AM 1240. In recognition of Memorial Day, we have joining us a special guest, a personal friend. For those just joining us, you've heard this several times for those of you who've been listening for this program, and I thank you for that support and for your patience. Hugh Salter from Carteret County, a former U.S. Federal Marshal, former Sheriff of Carteret County, but former U.S. Marshal, and a personal friend, somebody I grew up with, quite frankly. Well, a little older than me by a year or two. And also joining us, Richard Snow, the author of A Measureless Peril, America in the Fight for the Atlantic, the Longest Battle of World War II. You know, I initiated this conversation at the outset, Richard, with my question to Hugh. Do we, in this generation, I being a baby boomer, fully comprehend the immensity and just the sheer impact of that experience of World War II? Out of curiosity, what's your observation?
You know, I was born 2 years after it was over, and so it was sort of
anticlimactic for you.
Baby boomer, and it seemed it was odd when I was growing up. Everybody's dad had been in it, so it didn't seem any stranger than that they had a station wagon or wore shoes or something. So it really was only in thinking about it in much later years and starting to read about it that I realized what a titanic undertaking this was, what a total remaking of our society, and what a just a magnificent example of a society working at its most ingenious, hardest, and best to get together for a common cause of enormous importance. So it was really pretty much only I think when I was a grown-up did I begin to get an inkling of what this had meant, as opposed to simply being part of the landscape of my youth.
You know, it's interesting, and of course, Hugh, we'll talk about this in a moment. You experienced, again, I'll use that term, the terror. I've got to digress here. I want to go. Well, I want to ask you about that experience of being torpedoed, what it was like, what went through your mind. But before we do that, staying on this subject of Richard's, and again, the book, A Measureless Peril, A Measureless Peril, America in the Fight for the Atlantic, the Longest Battle of World War II. Obviously, based on that title, it's something that defies a simple metric to explain the impact and the cost, and also the effort engaged in this conflict.
That was Churchill's phrase. That was how he summed it up. He said it was the only thing that had scared him during the war, really, and it was measureless because there was no way to tell whether he was winning or losing. Interesting.
We know, and we'll chat on this very quickly. But you mentioned the entrepreneurial effort, the work that went into responding to this. Of course, the Liberty ships, the fact that we were putting out a ship every 5 days thereabouts.
We got so we could build a ship from keel to in 4.5 days, and we were doing that with the destroyer escorts too, which is in a way just even more impressive because they were built to naval standards, which were stricter than the standards used for the freighters.
It's interesting, having been through the ship graveyard, having served in both the East Coast and West Coast, and particularly going up the Sacramento River in California, passing the hundreds of Liberty ships that were really just built for temporary service. And
yes, and we started out when along the Carolinas, they were recruiting sports fishermen in 20-foot boats and telling them to go out and do something.
Right.
And just a couple of years later, our Navy was larger than all the other navies of the world combined. It was an extraordinary effort, and I think
women did the most of the building.
Right. Rosie the Riveter.
Yeah,
Rosie the Riveter. Yep.
And you mentioned this, and we won't take long to focus on this, but you mentioned this a moment ago, and also it comes through in the book with our guest Richard Snow, the author. You know, we not only altered the way